Good afternoon. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order, the September 5th Budget and Finance Committee. Really don't have any announcements, but moving on to the item on the agenda is the State Road 37 discussion.
Bryce, forget to turn my mic on. So our Assistant Director of Engineering, Hatem Mekki, is going to give you guys kind of an update on where we stand on 37.
Good afternoon, everyone. For the record, Hatem Mekki, Assistant Director of Engineering, City of Fishers. Before you, we have the State Road 37 cost status. This is basically a cut and paste from the latest financial plan that has been approved by NDOT in March of this year. This also has been shared with the county and also with the city of Noblesville, so everyone at this point is on the same page. As you can see in front of you, there's the estimated cost that is separated by the types, and below that is the funding and the expenditures that we have to date. The total project cost to this date is $168.9 million. NDOT commitments of the $100 million that's in the agreements between us and NDOT, in addition to the inspection that they have provided throughout the project so far. Fishers and the county to date has paid $17.6 million, and the projected remaining funds in the project is around...
Some context, we do have the resolution for a ban for 37, so we wanted to have engineering come in and kind of give you guys an update on where we stand. As he mentioned, the letting date isn't until later this year, potentially maybe even in 2022. But as we kind of move forward and we kind of evaluate the bond market, there's some potential interest rate risk. So we wanted to kind of bring it before you, get it authorized, and we'll continue to keep an eye on the market as we move forward. But that's why we decided to move forward here in September with it.
All these costs here are inclusive of what we're going to be talking about budget-wise in the bigger macro issue with respect to our plan, correct? Okay. Any surprises, cost overruns that we need to be aware about, to be thinking about as we move forward with this?
This should encompass a lot of the projected costs that we have. Obviously, there's still a couple of parcels that is left in the project for 141st Street. There's still some parcels that are out there that are being settled. We've already got the access to these parcels, but they're still being settled in courts. There is some of the items in the design that's still being finalized to this day, but this should encompass a lot of those aspects.
Okay, so really, there's really no bill. The surprise is just the costs of right-of-way and also drainage. I think that was an issue that came up a year ago when we passed some additional appropriation for funding on that, correct?
Yep.
Okay. Any questions from Selena? Do you have any questions?
I have a question. So, we all know that construction costs are going up. We're estimating this bid to come in the letting date of February 2022. Will that have some type of cushion in there for inflation of the materials and what else? What I don't want is I don't want to have to come back for more money because there's an overrun on that. I mean, what's the possibility of making sure that that's 100?
Absolutely. Obviously, the letting, we can't necessarily say that this is going to come in at that price, but there is that opportunity in the letting date and the bids that come in, like we've seen on the other interchanges, that some of the bids come below the estimated project cost that came from the engineers. Some of these that we have in here have some attributed inflation in it, so that can encompass a lot of these issues that we're seeing currently with the construction cost and the rising construction costs. Yep.
Okay. Well, Hatem, thank you very much for the update. Always
you.
A pleasure to see you. Last time we worked a lot together was on the trail, and looks like we're doing okay there.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Moving on to our next item on our agenda, the 2022 budget discussion and capital and debt.
As we get started, Councilmember Weingart, I would just tell you that tonight we're going to do a quick review of the capital projects that we intend to fund for this upcoming year. We're going to give you a snapshot of our current status around long-term debt for the city. And then at a very high level, I'm going to start to articulate the strategy for which we would be able to invest in these quality of life amenities while still overall seeing a tax reduction as we look forward into the next decade of the city of Fishers. So with that, Lisa, do you want to go ahead and we'll get started with this?
Yeah. I'll go ahead and I'll talk through a lot of these pretty quickly. We've talked a lot about these. But just real quick, kind of as we go through what we're looking for in 2022 related to infrastructure investments. So what we kind of did, you guys have seen the Grice Greenway, Cumberland Road, kind of the resurfacing, curb ramp upgrades, right-of-way and design. So what we kind of want to do is just give you an idea of where those show funding-wise. So for example, Grice Greenway, coming from park impact fees, potentially some, if we do approve the 2021 GO bond in there. Same with Cumberland Road, resurfacing, kind of just give you an update on that. Same with the design and right-of-way, mainly road impact fees for those. Probably more.
One thing, if I could, Lisa, real briefly on that last slide, I think one thing that might be slightly underestimated as you look at the $5.1 million for construction, that is your local contribution to those projects. That's not the sum total of the amount of money that is going into these projects. So a lot of these, Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're 80-20 matches. So there's significant funds coming from the city, for instance, for Cumberland Road, things of that nature. So the total amount of actual infrastructure improvements is far above 5.1 million for construction next year.
Yeah. Definitely getting a lot of value for these quote unquote relatively small amount we might be seeing. So 5.1, but you're getting, that's only 20% of what the actual project cost is. We kind of want to give you a timeline of when you can kind of see some of these projects come to completion. So initially we're expecting Cynthia and Southeastern in late summer of 2022. Same with Grice Greenway, phase 1A and 1B, be a very, very late 22, I'd say late fall, winterish kind of is the time frame I would put for Grice Greenway. Cumberland Road rehab will obviously be kind of some extensive work. So while the construction will actually get underway in 2022, you won't see completion until 2023 on that project. And then, as we've kind of talked about in here, you know, these road projects take a significant amount of time from, you know, design, right-of-way acquisition to actual completion. So a lot of the funding will kind of get these projects off the ground and start the preliminary design and the right-of-way so we can actually do the construction. And so you'll see 106th and Hoosier, 136 widening, 126 in Southeastern, Oleo in Southeastern, and 116th in Allisonville. And these are just really getting their start and kind of getting off the ground with the 2022
And I think
budget.
sometimes people might look at that list and go, well, why can't we get them built next year? And in reality, it's not only a matter of they take time to build or design and build, but in reality, these are all, I think, federally funded, if I'm not mistaken. And because of that, they do calls for projects as far out as 5 years. So when Jason goes and submits to the MPO, we're submitting right now for fiscal year 25 and 26, I believe. And so the funding that we receive for a project, that money isn't going to be available until 25 or 26. So these are slated based on the federal allotment of dollars we got in the fiscal year that the federal government gave that money to us. So that's a little bit of the reason you see these kind of drawn out projects.
As we've talked about, kind of the fleet loan is our main source of really replacement vehicles. So for 2022, we're looking at a little over 3 million, between 3 million and 3.1 million for the fleet loan. We've kind of walked through this again. The big thing is as we continue to cycle through 4 police cars, 18 replacements in that fleet, but then 3 cars for the anticipated 3 new officers in there. So in addition for the police cars, it's not just the car itself, but as we've talked about, the upfitting is very expensive in those. Same with kind of some of the medic trucks for the fire department. But most of the project or the fleet on this list are replacements. There's very few new, really new items. And like I said, the three police cars are to outfit the new officers. As we've talked about before, we budget our fleet loan payments from CCD, so we're at about 2.8, and that encompasses our 18 loan and through the 2022 anticipated lease payment amount. Again, we've talked a lot about capital. These are, again, some of the things we've walked through, but also how they're being funded. So couple from general fund, key to the city, potentially bike share stations, Maker's Playground, and then the remaining funds in CCD go a lot for building repairs, as we've talked about. Then the pickleball courts at River Glen through kind of park impact fees. And as we look at the agri park and getting restroom facilities out there, that's a grant option we're exploring. So this just kind of gives everybody a better idea of, while these projects are approved, kind of where they're being approved from in the budget sense. So usually in capital, a lot of them are non-general fund related. And the capital that's in the general fund is overall extremely small. I think it's like 200,000. So they're not significant investments. The bulk of the capital investments comes from the other funds. So we can walk into this debt. And so we've talked a lot about this, is what kind of debt do we have and what is outstanding. So right now, a little over 411 million. So this does take into account bans that we have out that are in there. So as we talk through this, and you guys are aware, we have predominantly tax-backed debt, and that's what a lot of people are familiar with. That's debt that can be levied on homes. You have conduit debt. As we talked about before in Finance Committee, conduit debt is essentially not our debt. It's debt that we issue, but the debt payments are the obligations of usually the developer who has bought their own bond. We truly bear no liability on conduit debt. However, you're required to show it for accounting purposes on financial statements. Capital leases, that's predominantly our fleet loan and some guaranteed savings contract through wastewater. Then utility debt is our current outstanding utility debt. That's a pretty small portion of the overall pie. So this is by the security, which I was mentioning. So we have debt by the security, and so property tax backed, again, is the biggest, and then we have lit backed, and then TIF only backed. And so like we talk a lot about this, especially in terms of economic development deals, a lot of times just because a debt is supported by a security does not mean that that is the true payment source for that debt. So even though it may be a property tax-backed debt, that doesn't necessarily mean it's paid from property taxes. So as you can see, you're looking at about 68% that shows as property tax-backed. But when you go to actual payment source, you go down almost 16%. So this shows you of the debt that we have, how it truly is paid by the city. So as with any type of municipality, the bulk of it is a property tax backed, but you also see you have some road impact fee debt and a large amount that is truly paid by the tax increment financing that's brought in. So kind of wanted to walk through this. There's a lot of talk about municipal debt. What is our municipal debt compared to other municipalities? How do we compare? And so what this does is kind of walk through the 10 largest cities. I did exclude Indianapolis just because for reporting purposes, the city and county of Marion and Indianapolis are combined. It's kind of hard to get true numbers through them. So we just kind of stuck to what I would term our comparable partners here in municipalities. So as you can see, the bulk, far and away, you've got Carmel, you've got Fort Wayne, you have Evansville, and then those three are essentially double or anybody that comes next. So I believe in the last census I had, we're the fifth largest, excluding Indianapolis, we're fourth overall. So we're right in line with where we are population-wise compared to debt overall. This is a lot of terms get thrown around, especially in terms of debt per capita. I don't necessarily think debt per capita means necessarily a lot, but it's a very popular number to throw out there. Especially out there on Gateway, they like to show you debt per capita. So this kind of just shows you, per the updated census, where we fall. Again, fall fourth in line, which makes sense. Again, less than half of what Carmel is. You can see Noblesville is coming up pretty fast also in debt per capita. This slide I think is interesting because the other ones I've shown you previously are the 10 largest. However, if you just actually go per capita, what happens is you pull in two smaller cities and towns, particularly Plainfield and Mishawaka. So if you look, Plainfield comes in at about 6,500 per capita, and then Mishawaka comes in before us at about 4238. So it is kind of interesting to think about in a per capita time. Just because we were looking at 10 largest doesn't mean we're necessarily that overall when you throw in some of these other cities and towns. So just kind of give everybody an overall overview of where we stand, kind of compared to other municipalities in the state. And then I will put this up here and I'll let Mayor take it away.
So I think important to note, as we talk about our long-term financial debt strategy, Lisa and Ellie and I had spent some time trying to figure out the graphical representation of the strategy that we anticipate using and kind of how this all plays into going forward. So the turquoise line, if you will, is the amount of annual debt payments that the city would have, which would correlate obviously to the amount of debt you actually have on your books. And I think it's important to understand the context for which we find our city. You know, because of your guys' work over the last 8 to 10 years, we have a new fire station headquarters. We have a new police station headquarters. We built out our fire station system. We're about to finish out building it out. You're building State Road 37. You've upgraded Allisonville Road. A lot of these significant investments that we needed in our community have been accomplished. 106th Street interchange is another great example. So I think we're in a really good place as you see where we kind of crescendo, if you will, with debt payments in 2023 and 2024. Keep in mind our current fiscal plan anticipates that, and we still are exceptionally confident that we wouldn't be seeing a tax increase due to that debt crescendoing in 23 and 24. As you see after 2024, things start to trail off in the amount of debt payments that we have to make on an annual basis, and it continues to trail off as you move forward, which is logical. If you don't issue any more debt, you're going to pay off your principal. Some of those are going to expire, and we have some pretty aggressive amortizations setups too. If you recall, when we did Fire Station 91 and Fire Station 93, we amortized those on 10 years. So you're paying off a brand new fire station headquarters in 10 years. So as you burn that off, you really start to open up your capacity from a debt perspective. The only thing that I wanted to touch on tonight with the committee, and I'm going to bring back actual financial models to demonstrate how we would go about doing this, but just so we start to get on the same page about strategic levers, is identifying the appropriate time in which to bring on the debt obligations for City Hall, for the community center, that fits along with our overall long-term debt strategy and our operational needs. And I really think from a debt perspective, I think the 2030, 2031 timeframe is the appropriate time to accomplish that. And so you see that blue line that comes into play. And what we tried to model out there is, okay, let's assume that we fund those two projects and we take out bonds to pay for the remaining principal of both of those projects in 2030 and 2031. Then what does our debt trajectory look like moving forward? So the difference between those two lines is really just your procurement of those two quality of life investments in our community. You're still going to see an overall decline in the amount of debt and the debt payments that the City of Fishers has from 2024. That's that dotted blue line above. That demonstrates kind of the decline that we're going to see. And really, so what I'm going to bring back to you at the next meeting is the financial instruments and the specific numbers and strategies that get you from today to 2030 and 2031, and what are the financial ramifications for doing that. So that's the general strategy we have moving forward, and really that's the overall debt outlook that I see for our city. We have accomplished an awful lot in a short period of time, and I think the other important thing to note here too, this doesn't count like developer-backed bonds. So if you guys were to go do an economic development project, the debt payment in there is not included in here because we're not responsible financially for those. So it still frees you up the opportunity to go issue debt as a conduit if you decided to do because of an economic development project. But really tonight, my only goal was to give you a snapshot kind of the debt and where our overall debt strategy will be. We're going to refine those numbers and come back to you at a later date to start talking through the actual financial instruments. But are there any specific questions kind of directionally about that strategy at this time?
Questions from the committee?
Welcome, David.
Yeah, apologize, I was late. I'm a positive thinker, so instead of missing every green light, I actually made every red light on the way here. So,
Nice.
and I know we talked the last time, you guys, in the Board of Public Works, you have a contract to do schematic for the two big projects.
Correct.
Is that you kind of,
Well, I'm hoping to
estimating
have
the total
more of that
amount.
information before I come back and refine that. Oftentimes in other situations where we have a ballpark idea of what something will cost, like a fire station, we may go get the financing first and then go procure. In this particular situation, we're out trying to select those teams now so that we can actually have an informed discussion on the financial strategy moving forward. The RFP for City Hall, the teams should submit tomorrow, will be the date of submittal, and then the recreational center is not for another 30 days. And then after that, those teams are gonna have to be selected, and then they're gonna have to spend some time figuring out what it is we wanna do, and then we'll be able to come back with a more precise financial model going forward.
so really what this does is it shows what the trend is to have a gap, so to
Yes.
speak, and then that can layer into what the.
Yeah, all I really wanted to accomplish tonight as we start to have these discussions is that we're all operating after the same landscape, the same perspective of where is the city heading from a debt perspective? What does our forecast look like? You know, if that turquoise line was going straight up, you would have a set of questions that were far different regarding how we were going to finance these projects and not have an undue burden on our residents. So it's important for everyone to be on the same page about where those lines are. And then I think also just the broader context of we've already accomplished an awful lot in terms of investments into the community. So I think we're in a strong place and feel confident we'll be able to provide these amenities for our residents.
And so the top line does incorporate some assumptions on what these might cost down the road. It's just one of those that we don't know, so it's kind of we put in what I would term a conservative guess to put in there to build, to show that it still has the capacity
Correct. Yeah,
within
Lisa,
it.
that's a great point, Lisa. That dark blue line could move up or down slightly one way or another. It was just an estimate early on of what the potential budget could be for both of these facilities.
Other questions, Selena? I know this, we're gonna have to worry about doing like a referendum or anything like that.
No.
Is from
There'll be no referendum. These will be property tax-backed instruments, not income tax. And so, no, I don't, there'll be no referendums required,
Just always like to ask those questions, just to see
Yep.
what we're gonna be doing.
for sure.
All right.
Any other questions
Any
on
questions on
either the
this?
capital budget or the debt?
You know, the one thing I didn't see we've got a new fire station coming along. How are we what equipment's gonna go there? I really didn't see any equipment going up there.
The budget that we have contemplated in the bond issuance would include FF&E and a fire truck.
So
That's rolled into that.
okay, so
that
everything's
bond.
all in one
Yes.
piece?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure.
No, I'm glad you brought that up.
And then the fire department operating budget contemplates that station coming on in terms of supplies and equipment needs.
And what
Kind
we're
of like,
doing- What we're doing with respect to park impact fees, that takes into account our new park impact fees that we're starting to take
It
that process
does.
through?
It does. Now, to be conservative, we did not increase our estimate of revenue in our fiscal plan, nor did we budget to spend that new revenue. So let's assume council approves that new park impact fee that's higher. It would go into effect generally around January 1, 6 months after you guys approve it. So we would have a full year of collecting that, but out of an abundance of caution, we did not.
Okay,
We didn't
Good.
spend the money before you guys approve it.
okay, very good. Those are my questions. Same as you. Thank you. Moving on to our consent agenda, do I have a motion to approve our consent agenda?
And I apologize, I'm not storming out. I have another meeting I got to get to, so
Quite
I
all right.
apologize.
So moved.
Motion by David? Second by Selena. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Moving on to our resolutions. Our first item, item 7 on the agenda, R092021A, approving a lease between the Fishers Redevelopment Authority and the Fishers Redevelopment Commission with respect to Station 97.
All right, so the item before you is the kind of final statutory step to issue the debt for Station 97. So this will be, end up being property tax backed, but it will be out on the side of Fishers that we've discussed. It's already been approved, or will be approved by the Redevelopment Authority and the Redevelopment Commission. And so what we did was build in some cushion in this one as we work on nailing down the cost of the project, the FF&E, so the fire truck and that stuff is all included in this bond amount.
Okay. Any questions for Lisa on this? Do you have a motion to recommend approval to the council? A motion by Selena, do I have a second? Second. Second by David. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay, be recommended for approval next Monday. Moving on to item 8, R092021B, approving the lease between Fisher Development and Fisher Development Commission on State Road 37.
So as we talked about previously, this is really the kind of final piece of our obligations for the State Road 37 project. As was mentioned, we don't think we need the funds immediately, but as we kind of evaluated the market and some potential interest rate changes, we wanted to make sure that if for some reason, as you guys know, it's a great time to issue municipal debt right now because the rate is so low, and we were afraid if we did wait potentially until January or February and something happened and we saw a big uptick, that we would, it could be a significant amount that we would pay and lose in interest. So wanted to go ahead and bring this forward. It has a not to exceed amount in there where we're planning around 15 million for actual. That's, again, based on discussions with engineering, worst case scenario. I don't think that's going to be the case. And if interest rates stay low, we're not going to pull the trigger until the time is needed. But this was just more, you just never know as we get to this kind of end of the year interest rate risk. We didn't want to take that chance because it could be, up to $500,000, if not, potential more on interest.
Sure.
So.
Questions for Lisa? I do, May.
I don't have any questions, but Lisa, I really appreciate you really watching the markets like that and giving us the best deal on the interest rates, and really into that. Thank you.
Sure. Do you have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion by David, I have a second. Second by Selena. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Be recommended for approval Monday night at the council meeting. Moving on to ordinances, item 9 on the agenda, 092021. Request to approve the City of Fishers budget. This is up for first reading and public hearing Monday night at the council meeting.
Yes. So just to reiterate, as we've talked a lot about this budget, a balanced budget, half-cent tax decrease is what this budget reflects. The health department funding itself essentially with taxes. So one thing that we kind of want to note about the health department is that the health department activities that are undertaken and that are paid for through the health department fund, so that fund you see in the fiscal plan, those are all what I would term activities and expenses related to the care of Fishers residents. So if, for example, those are things very specific to, for example, like vital record software or things that you have to have for a city health department, the costs that are associated, I would say, with quote-unquote non-Fishers residents would be, the vaccine site and the testing site. And so those are not paid for through the health department fund. Right now, those are paid for through our request for reimbursement through FEMA. The one thing that may come through for the health department is contact tracing. One of the things that you'll notice is that contact tracing funds are not available for reimbursement through FEMA. So FEMA will not reimburse us for contact tracing. Contact tracing is only available through Health and Human Services. Health and Human Services gave the money to the state. The state doesn't want to give the money to local governments. So what you have seen and what we have, the only use of, I will say, American Rescue Plan funds, so the ARP funds, as you guys recall, we got that first $3.4 million. The only thing that has been used, those funds have been used for currently is contact tracing, because that's the only kind of what I would term COVID pandemic expense that you can't get reimbursed, that we as a city can't get reimbursed for directly. So that will be through the ARP funds. But other than that, as we've talked a lot about in this budget, a pretty straightforward budget with a pretty strong investment in our public safety and then in our employees, I feel.
Any questions? I presume Monday night we'll have a little deeper dive.
Yes, and so
I'd like
what-
to see a lot of information. We've had a
Yes.
number of meetings already.
Yes.
Just want to make sure everyone kind of knows where we are and what we're doing.
Yes, so we will, the mayor or Elliot will make our formal presentation. One of the things as we continue to talk about is we've continued to build up our cash reserves, especially in the general fund. So overall, we've got a pretty strong balance in the general fund cash reserves. And as we kind of go forward, as the mayor mentioned, in kind of these other potential quality of life capital projects, the discussion will become for you as to how do we want to draw down on that excess capital moving forward with those. So as you guys have looked at the fiscal plan, as you guys can see, all the other, you can't interchange funds in how you pay for things. So overall, the strongest fund balance is always the general fund because that is the fund that you can do the most with. So the one that I would say you'd want that has, even though there is no Indiana requirement, we have our fund balance requirement. And then the other funds, we try to keep, a year of operating expense or something kind of in there, but there is no like mandated fund balance. We try to keep what we feel is appropriate to get us through on those fund, but we'll bring before you a presentation which really talks a lot about kind of the fund balance and more of those quality in life investments.
So obviously next month we'll be talking a little bit more about the debt strategy for those couple of those quality of life projects. So envisioning maybe we might use some of those reserves at some point in time potentially.
I would think so because while it's nice to have excess capital funds, we also as we've talked before, and this is a graph I usually show S&P is you've got if your bar graph is here on what you need and we're up here, you've got that excess right here. At what point does it become of value to draw those funds down?
Okay. Any other questions for Lisa? Do I have a motion to recommend first reading Monday night? Motion by Selena, second by David. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Recommend to have first reading. Moving on to item 10, 081621, regarding the issuance of bond anticipation notes, procure the acquisition of our sewer department, or sewer, HSC.
Yep. So again, this item was before you last month. No changes to it. We just kind of had an introduction and first reading, and so this will be second and third and hopefully adoption as we move forward. We haven't seen any significant roadblocks in that. Everything is moving forward as the timeline we've anticipated. So this will help us if we have approval as we kind of start to feel out the market for this bond to go acquire HSC.
Okay, well, we had first reading, I believe we had second reading.
Second and third, hopefully. Second and third. We did.
Second, third Monday night.
Yep.
It's been through our committee a couple times. Any questions from the committee with respect to this? A motion to recommend for approval. Motion by David, do I have a second? Second by Selena. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any unfinished or new business? I'll motion to adjourn. So moved. We are adjourned. Have a great rest.